You're on the clock.
Only two.
She's running.
Take one. Oh.
You're so clever. Hey, how's your house going?
No.
She thinks it's great.
I wanna see it.
I was on the phone negotiating with a guy who's buying my old house.
Oh.
Every time.
Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh.
And it's noticed the last minute, it's gonna be waiting until the last minute.
Okay, great.
All right. All right, pretend that didn't happen.
Okay.
I'll now call this meeting of the State Board of Education to order and entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing student discipline appeals, personnel, and pending litigation. I need a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Ellis, second by Donaldson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
I should have seen that coming. All right, we are adjourned
Go
for
on.
executive session.
Oh.
Those of you that are joining us in person and virtually, we will be back in session for our budget committee meeting at 1 p.m.
Y'all have to get the minutes to that.
Not in the mood. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the committee meetings of the Georgia State Board of Education. My name is Stan DeJarnin. It's my honor to chair this board this year. Our first committee meeting is the Budget Committee meeting. And I will now turn it over to our Budget Committee Chair, Mr. Leonte Benton. Mr. Benton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Russ. Kick it off, item number 1.
All right, item number 1 is Individualized Education Program Facilitation Training. The purpose of this contract is to provide training on IEP team facilitation to local school districts and state contracted facilitators. The total contract amount is not to exceed $309,600.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay, item number 2.
All right, item number 2 is our FY25 Title III Part A Immigrant Subgrants. Purpose of this grant is to ensure English learners, including immigrant children and youth, attain English proficiency and develop high levels of academic achievement in English. The grant amount is not to exceed $1,021,297.
Thank you, Russ. Any questions? Thank you. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is our FY24 National School Lunch Program Equipment Assistance Grant. The purpose of this grant is to allow our school food authorities to purchase equipment to improve the quality of school meals, improve food safety, expand participation, and improve overall efficiency of the school nutrition program. The total grant amount is not to exceed $391,360.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, item number 4.
Item number 4 is a contract amendment with the Georgia State University Child Welfare Training Collaborative. This contract provides high-quality mental health awareness training to school districts and regional education service agencies through the RESA, Georgia Department of Education Mental Health Awareness Training Project. The total amount of the amendment is $173,678, which brings the total contract amount not to exceed $336,178.
Thank you, Russ. Any questions?
Just one. Where's the additional funding coming from?
Justin?
Hey, yes, is this about our Georgia State item? I'm sorry, I was having some sound issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the additional funding is actually coming from previous fiscal year purchase orders with Georgia State that were unspent. So because it's continues to be the same purpose of funding, we're trying to spend down our old POs. So it's just coming from there.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can she speak a little bit about the program, a little bit more about, the trauma?
The description.
A description of it, a little bit.
Sure. So Georgia State University, the Child Welfare Training Collaborative, has been one of our partners on the mental health awareness training menu since the get-go. And so they have probably the largest array of courses on the menu, but they all fall under the realm of mental health awareness. So there are things like lots of different courses at different time points related to trauma, suicide prevention, general mental health awareness topics. And if you're interested in an actual detailed list of all of those courses, I'm happy to make sure those get shared with y'all.
Thank you.
Please do, thank you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Okay, thank you all. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is a grant for our FY25 School-Based Health Center Renovation Grant. These grant funds, in alignment with the Governor's School-Based Health Center Initiative and support, will provide renovation and infrastructure funds for the new school-based health center in Henry County Schools. The total grant amount is not to exceed $308,000.
Sir, any questions? Thank you. Let's go to item number 6.
Item number 6 is a grant for Georgia Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program. This grant will support a teaching apprenticeship program in 5 rural school districts: Candler, Crisp, Lee, Screven, and Sumter counties by providing funds for coursework and training for apprentices and pre-apprentices in the preparation for teacher certification in Georgia. The total grant amount is not to exceed $405,750.
Thank you. Any questions? Matt?
I'm interested how we're funding this. This is through REI, so I was curious if it was the continuation of federal pandemic relief or.
So, Heather Finley, that's on our team, wrote a grant with the Department of Labor, and got, almost $4 million, so it's coming from that grant.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? All right, item number 7.
Item number 7 is a contract with Georgia Southern University Research and Service Foundation. This contract will provide a supplementary secondary math pilot program to increase student achievement in the area of secondary mathematics in school districts throughout the state. The total contract amount is not to exceed $475,000.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Is this item, coordinated with the, release of the math standards? And could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, this $475,000 was part of the state budget, and so that is why Georgia Southern will be facilitating that pilot that will be directly associated with secondary mathematics. And yes, it would be our expectation that the work would align with our new math standards so that it supports students' remediation, acceleration, improvements in the classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Anything with item number 8?
Any questions?
Okay.
Okay, the first item, Allison Yay, I was looking at that, and the description of what she's going to be doing, is that a position that's being covered by someone else at this point, or?
That's just temporary support for communications and policy, so some of the recent work has been putting together the legislative priorities handout that I'm sure you're aware of, and also supporting us with the new website design as well.
Okay, and one other question, and the person that is going to be doing this, will that also include any communication or whatever for the state board, or is just for the department?
It's for the department, this kind of, but of course, things that impact y'all's work on the website, legislative priorities work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions or comments for items under item number 9? That includes. Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Benton, is it your wish that we added items 1 through 9 to the consent agenda?
Yes,
For
sir.
tomorrow's meeting?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, our posting rules prohibit us from starting our district flexibility and charter schools committee meeting until 1:45. So I'm gonna ask that we will go into recess and we will reconvene at 1:45 for district flexibility and charter schools. the session back to order. And it is now time for us to hear from the chairman of the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee and the items. And so I'll turn it over to Chairman Scott Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that silence was also rare and very quiet. We have 3 items before us today, and Kenneth and I had met previously to discuss these items with Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Taylor will turn this over to you for item number 1.
Item number 1 is a request to approve a charter system contract amendment for Fannin County Schools and Hart County Schools. Both Fannin County and Hart County Schools are seeking to amend the dates of their charter system contracts in order to align their charter system renewal process with the district accreditation procedures timeline. Fannin County Schools seeks to amend their term by 1 year for a contract end date of June 30th, 2026. The Fannin County Board of Education approved this contract amendment petition on November 14th, 2024. Hart County Schools seeks to amend their term by 2 years for a contract end date of June 30th, 2027. And Hart County Board of Education approved their charter system amendment petition on October 14th, 2024.
Are there any questions?
Just a comment for the full board. When we discussed this amendment earlier, we just discussed the reasons why a system would want to do this, to align their accreditation visits along with their their renewal process. It's just, saving time with staff, collecting the documentations, and also being able to get your groups within your schools for interviews. So it just aligns the process. They don't have to do this again for another certification. So it's wise on their part.
Any other questions? All right. Without objection, we'll move this to the consent agenda. Item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is a request from Gilmer County Schools to amend their charter system contract to add the Gilmer College and Career Academy to their contract. College and career academies must undergo a rigorous certification process through the Technical College System of Georgia and must have a governing board reflective of its community and representation from its key strategic partners. The Gilmer County Board of Education approved their charter system amendment on November 14th, 2024. And from Gilmer County, we have online Superintendent Brian Ridley and Assistant Superintendent Lottie Mitchell for any questions you may have.
Hello, Superintendent Ridley. Thank you very much for joining us today. Is there anybody that has any questions for Superintendent Ridley and his colleague? Hearing none. We'd love to hear a little bit about the academy and what your plans are and its installation.
You just asked what I was going to ask.
Okay. All right. Well, on behalf of everybody in Gilmer County, our Board of Education, our staff and students, want to thank you for the opportunity to address you today and answer any questions you may have. Our College and Career Academy has been a very interesting process. Back in 2019, we had a needs assessment developed by our Greater Gilmer Joint Development Authority, assessing future workforce needs in Gilmer County. And then as part of our charter system renewal in 2019, we included the development of a CCA as one of our innovative features. But then unfortunately, COVID happened, and we went through all the same things that everybody else went through, and we were unable to really follow through on that. So it wasn't until the 2022-2023 school year that we really resumed our efforts to establish a CCA. We applied for the CCSG grant. They gave away 2 grants that year. We were 3rd place, so we were not awarded one. But we felt that if the College and Career Academy model was a good idea with the grant, it would be a good idea without the grant or until we got it. So we went ahead and we named a board of directors and appointed a CEO and began the process of into that model. During 23-24, we reapplied for the TCSG grant. They only gave away one, and we came in second place, unfortunately. So in February, we got our charter renewed without the TCSG CCA as part of the contract. And then a little later in the spring, some additional funds came along that was allowed TCSG to provide a second grant that we received. And so we are submitting this amendment to include the Gilmer College and Career Academy, solidify our role in enhancing the workforce readiness and educational opportunities for the whole community. So this is technically our inaugural year. We have a number of pathways in agriculture, audiovisual, automotive, computer science, construction. They're all laid out for you. We have a very robust work-based learning and dual enrollment program. We also offer middle school pathways in agriculture, business, family, consumer sciences, and technology. One of the features of our College and Career Academy is our Lead Gilmer program. That started through a grant through the University of North Georgia, teaching students employability skills and doing community service projects and really teaching kids about our community. So when that grant ran out, we decided it was our responsibility to pick that up and continue to run with it. That's been a very nice feature. We've developed some great partnerships with our post-secondary partners, Chattahoochee Technical College, UNG, Dalton State. We are continuing to expand our offerings. We're going to add business and engineering, and we've got plans to move into a new space. We're currently in the process of building a performing arts center that will house not only our fine arts facilities, but also our nutrition and food science pathway, and the classrooms that we vacate in the main high school building will be reoriented and renewed to house audiovisual, early childhood education, all of our public safety pathways, and CNA. So, I'm sorry. And finally, one of the crowning jewels of our College and Career Academy is our new Poultry Research Center. And I could say a lot about it, but I think pictures say 1,000 words, and we have a short video. If you don't mind, we'd like to play that for you.
Please.
All right, Lottie, can you go ahead and hit that?
Sure.
Hey, I'm Dr. Ridley, Superintendent of the Gilmer County Schools, and I'm here to welcome you to our Poultry Research Center, the only K-12 research facility in America and a one-of-a-kind experience that brings agri-science to high school students. This facility would not have been possible without the active involvement of the Gilmer County community. Pilgrims of LJ, a key partner in this initiative, provided essential funding and technical support. Local businesses and industry experts also played a role by demonstrating their commitment to supporting innovative educational opportunities. Chore Time provided poultry equipment, Farm Credit provided furniture for the classrooms, and Fairmount Poultry provided building materials. The Poultry Research Center consists of a 200-foot chicken house that can house up to 10,000 chicks. It includes state-of-the-art feeding and watering systems, as well as a meeting space for students. Large observation windows allow classes to maintain biosecurity standards while getting a first-hand look into the house environment. Our charter flexibility allowed the district to integrate hands-on agricultural research into the educational framework. We developed an advanced placement research course focused in poultry science in order to provide students with access to real-world experiences designed to spark interest in agri-science and other STEM fields. By equipping students with the skills and knowledge needed for careers in poultry science and agriculture, Gilmer County Schools is fostering a new generation of industry leaders. This innovative partnership between the district and Pilgrims of LJ not only enhances educational opportunities, but also strengthens the local workforce and economy, making a lasting, positive impact on both students and the community. We're certainly very proud of all of our pathways, particularly ag education and our College and Career Academy, and we sincerely appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Ridley. Does anybody have any questions at all?
but if you get the chance to visit, it's an amazing, the poultry, it's, I've been over there with some of the ag teachers. You get a chance, you're over that way, stop and visit.
One of the biggest industries in Georgia with regard to chicken, and I know annually the short name is the Chicken Pluckers Convention.
Yeah.
But held here, and I think it'd be a great opportunity for the students with the academy to be able to demonstrate some of the things they do.
The Bushy brothers are great ag teachers over there.
Yeah. All right, well, without objection, we'll be moving this to the consent agenda for tomorrow. And thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate your time being here.
Thank you very much.
All right. Ms. Taylor, item number 3, State Charter Schools Commission.
Yes, for item number 3, Mr. Alan Mueller from the State Charter Schools Commission is coming to provide information.
Just gonna swap here, close your eyes for just a second, we'll just appear here. Everyone, greetings from the Office of Charter School Compliance and the Charter School Commission. We just have one item that is about 2 amendments, both to Fulton County Charter Schools. These are schools that you approved their contracts last year. They both renewed, but then they are both asking for small changes in their contracts. So Fulton County Schools has requested the following charter contract amendments for Amana Academy, adding 13 students to the school's enrollment cap, which raises the cap to 875 students, and that grants them, it allows them to qualify for a federal charter school program grant. So they're just bumping up, the district's letting them bump it up a little bit so they can access those funds. For Skyview High School, removing a goal related to TSI and CSI designations, and that's a standard goal we have in charter contract. This is a dropout recovery program, so it's not really appropriate to have the CSI and TSI language in there for them. And then the last one is for both schools, both the district and the school had requested revising the accountability language for comparison performance. This is that looking at schools that students would have otherwise attended. It's just for the grammar of that phrase, they wanted it changed a little bit to be consistent with the way they've had it in the past. We changed it a little bit in all the contracts, and they wanted consistency, which if they both agree on it, we're allowing them to do that.
Fantastic.
So those changes were reviewed and approved by our staff and were approved by Fulton County Board of Education. Skyview's amended contract expires on June 30th, 2028. Amana's amended contract expires on June 30th, 2029. So it doesn't change the end dates of the contracts, just that language I mentioned.
And correct me if I'm wrong, are we, and I'm just looking through one of the contracts right now,
Mm-hmm.
Is the board a signatory to the contract, or is it only seeking affirmation for what you've approved?
Well, all 3 parties have to approve of this. So yeah, the contract will go back out. The schools board will sign it, the district board will sign it, and then the state board will sign it.
This amended.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, this amended copy.
Yeah, so I just, there's always some, I don't want to say confusion, but
No, you can say that. There is often a lot of confusion around it, but that's.
Separately, when the State Charter Schools Commission approves a charter, for example.
Right.
We're in the affirmation side, even
That's
though
right.
we're not a party to the contract, but we are a party to the.
That's right. The state contracts are 2-party contracts. The local contracts are 3-party contracts. So it is a little confusing, but thank you for pointing that out.
Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Any questions for Mr. Mueller?
I will say I promised, I think, last time or time before that I would bring the pipeline for y'all, which I haven't done this time just because it's the slow season and there aren't many changes. Just so you can expect in January, we should be bringing Tybee Island to you for renewal. That's a Savannah school, and it'll be a little more exciting next time.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So in reviewing both of the contracts, one's asking to remove the language about the CSI and one's not?
Right.
Any particular reason?
Yeah, because the one that requested the CSI removal is a dropout recovery program. Okay. So it's just because what's at stake there, they often do fall below that threshold and have support from school improvement anyway, but it's an unreasonable expectation that they will always beat that just because of the way kids move in and out and the way that the performance is there. So it's more about supporting those students. They still have, goals they have to hit, but it's just, yeah.
Actually, those students graduate from a homeschool.
Yes,
so it's a,
good point.
It's a program, so that would.
Yep. You're right. So that's really what we look at is whether that homeschool will be held accountable separately.
right, any further questions? All right, without objection, we'll move these to the consent agenda for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And Mr. Chair, that concludes the matters of business before the Charter Flexibility Committee.
So we'll be adding items 1, 2, and 3 to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, and we are right on time. So let us move forward to the Rules Committee. And I'll call on Chairman Frank Griffin. Mr. Griffin.
Yes, sir. Rules Committee has 3 items today. We'll get started with item number 1. Ms. Taylor?
Item number 1 is a request to bring a rule for initiation, which means if approved, the rule will be posted for at least 30 days for public review and comment. Rule 160-5-4-.15, processing of plans and specifications for public school construction, is being amended to add the requirement that each local board of education shall ensure that its local school system has consulted with their municipal or county law enforcement or emergency management agency on the design of any new facility or structure that will house public school children or that will be utilized to provide services to public school children. It also requires the local board of education to submit proof of this consultation prior to receiving final approval of their architectural plans or specifications for new school construction by the Georgia Department of Education. This amendment fits seamlessly with current approval requirements for school planning and construction. School system architectural plans for new school construction will not need approval by local law enforcement or emergency management agencies, but ensuring consultation is designed to foster proactive collaboration on school safety efforts between these critical local partners. Again, if approved, this rule will be posted for at least 30 days for public review and comment.
Does rule initiation require a separate vote, or can it be?
It does not, it goes for consent.
Any comments from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I want to just share, as a member of law enforcement and someone who served on a local board, I think this change to the rule does really address the needs for the collaboration. And I can just share from my experience as being a captain and a board chair, if I wouldn't have held both of those roles simultaneously, there would have been less cooperation and collaboration in our school district. But because of those roles I held at the same time, it really ensured that law enforcement was coming to the table and the school system was both coming to the table. And in this light of school safety, I think it's very important for local boards, superintendents, chiefs, and sheriffs to share the conversation on school plans. Because even if a school system does have their own police department, their primary response is going to be the agency in that local jurisdiction. So if you're depending on a sheriff's office or a police department to respond to aid you in a crisis or emergency, and they don't know the layout of your school, you can't expect them to come in and be proactive in that response, because they're going to be fumbling through a lot of things. There's a lot of things that they're not going to know unless they're involved in that school district, working games or participating in some type of extracurricular job. And so I think this amendment and the language fits what I think would help us push this to make sure that the collaboration is happening on the local level with our local law enforcement and our local boards of education and our superintendents.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Taylor, does that also include the fire department as well? Because what they need to know concerning any emergency that goes on within the buildings of the school, will they also be at the table as well?
We encourage that they include the fire department as well, yes.
Your EMA, and I'll say this, Ms. Lisa, your EMA director serves as the coordinator for those local communities. And so, you know, a lot of the EMA directors are having quarterly or monthly meetings with all of the directors, and that goes from the police chiefs, sheriffs, EMS directors, and also the fire chiefs. And then you also have the volunteers. A lot of the local, especially in the rural areas, the local EMA served as the director or leader over those volunteer fire departments. And so that person is very instrumental in coordinating with all stakeholders of public safety.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure they were included because it wasn't mentioned in there. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. I just had a clarifying question to you about like first response in emergency situation. I think you answered. It's going to look different in every county. Sometimes it's going to be the sheriff's department.
Yes. Yes.
But in other districts, it's gonna look different, but what this does is ensures there's some coordination
Yes.
and communication between whomever is in that authority.
Yes.
There's law enforcement.
Yes. So some school districts only have a sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Some school districts have a municipal police department and a sheriff's office. And so, some of the things that we do in Wayne County is in every meeting, even though 5 of our schools are in the city limits, the sheriff is also at every meeting that we have as it relates to school safety.
So Nick, generally in smaller areas and larger areas, if in smaller areas where there's just one, there's generally that point person in that school that makes sure that all of this information is sifted out to the proper people. It's just not done randomly. There's sort of a procedure.
Yeah, the sheriff or the chief can designate an agency head. Most of the chiefs and sheriffs now in this, state of crisis that we're dealing with school safety are at those meetings themselves. And they may have their assistant command staff members that participate, but a lot of the chiefs and sheriffs are getting involved in this school safety initiative from all over the state.
That's a best practice. It's what
That
I'm
is a
hearing
best
across
practice.
our state.
Yes.
I would just say this, I would remind everybody that, we work with GEMA, we work with Homeland Security, all these entities, and of course with EMS. I requested this initiation be done just because, seeing out here, I did not want our buildings and facilities to impede the first response. I think in light of what has taken place early this year at Barrow County, but whether it's hurricanes, inclement weather, fire, as we talk about, we want to make sure that we can respond and meet the safety needs of anyone that's in that facility, and definitely making sure that we are contacting, working with our local first responders so that they're aware and just having an input, because sometimes, architecturally, it may look very pleasing, but it may actually hamper our first response. So we just want to make sure that we have a set of eyes that put safety first. Like we're not trying to, create prisons, but we are trying to look at something that eases that first response area.
Any other comments?
Just one, and remember our discussion last month about this. The intent of this rule has always been a good one. I think all of us can agree that collaboration is a good idea. But we didn't want to put liability on other local law enforcement or EMA, or put them in a position of having to get involved in a discussion that might cost the school district a lot of money, depending on when they were brought into that conversation, in terms of revising facility plans or, architectural drawings, that kind of thing. I think the changes here address this. It's more of a consultative language, but it also calls for some collaboration between school resource officers, the people who are on the ground with our students every day, and local law enforcement and emergency management. So I think all of the questions that we may have had last month, I think have been addressed. And I hope staff feels that way. But I think this has been good review work, and I think y'all did a great job with it.
Yes.
Any other comment? Again, this will be posted and comments active for 30 days.
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Ellis, while we're on school safety, you've got some comments you want to make?
I did have an opportunity to review some of the priorities that were presented by Superintendent Woods, and I will say that I strongly support us having a DOE coordinator. I think that's something that has been missing for local law enforcement agencies and local school districts, especially those that do not have the police departments in place or the SROs currently in place. This gives an opportunity for someone from this office to help facilitate some collaboration and getting some things in place. And even though the legislators have been gracious and given the $45,000, there's still a number of school districts that don't quite have those programs put in place. And so I really support that, and I wanted to, make sure that you all know that I think that this this person needs to have a great understanding of the Georgia law and our Georgia schools at the same time. I personally think that we have a lot of qualified people that could help lead in this effort, and that would fit in this role. And I hope that we will be able to get this approved and maybe recruit somebody that has that experience in a Georgia school and also serving as a Georgia law enforcement officer to help with that. The cell phone policy, that was something that I did get a chance to hear a few people on, and I think that is something that will help school districts having a policy in place to help facilitate how to manage the distractions of cell phones. And I can tell you locally, again, we made a policy to have a zero tolerance from 7:50 to 3:10. Back when I was on the local board, that policy is still in effect, and it really helped decrease a lot of things that were happening in our schools, and a lot of disruptions decreased at that time, especially, the bullying parts of it too. Teachers haven't had to do a lot of referrals for kids being disruptive on their phones in class because of that policy that was put in place. So I certainly think that helps the school culture and climate and the safety component. And again, there are priorities that I think that are very good that y'all are advocating for. And SROs in every school is something that I really want to see from, I think it's the best thing for us.
Trained
level. Trained, yes. And I will tell you a number of people from Georgia Post, the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, Gastro, a number of people are putting certifications in place to make sure that these SROs are not just people coming into the school to have this stuff them and cuff them mindset, but a trained SRO that can identify, help staff, and address issues when there's a need for issues to be addressed through criminal proceedings.
Any other comment?
Couldn't agree more, Mr. Ellis. Thank you. And by the way, Mr. Ellis is our kind of school safety lead. He's the de facto, but also officially our school safety lead. And we appreciate Whitmore for your contributions in the new year.
I do expect that there will probably be a number of bills that will come across that will address school safety. So
They've already started.
Whatever I can do, I'm here, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Sir, thank you very much. If you will allow me, we're gonna swap items 2 and 3, go ahead and knock calendar discussion out, because something tells me the screener list is gonna take up a little more time. So let's go ahead and address the calendar for next year.
Going to item number 3, the State Board of Education's bylaws require the board to adopt a calendar of meetings for the upcoming year at the last meeting of the calendar year. That draft calendar is posted for your review and approval.
Any comments from the board?
Well, just one. Since we posted this, I think we've all become aware that the date for the Georgia Chambers Eggs and Issues Breakfast has been scheduled for a Tuesday, which is January the 14th, instead of its customary Wednesday morning, for some very valid reasons. If no one has any objection, I'd like to recommend that we move, just for the month of January, that we move our committee meetings up to Tuesday, January the 14th, and our committee of the whole regular meeting to Wednesday, January the 15th. And recommend that we have that amendment made to the calendar. All the other dates are good. For those of you in the room that may not be familiar with the guidance on this, as we just discussed in the previous rule initiation, we have to allow 30 calendar days for public comment. And that's why to accomplish that, we can't schedule a meeting every month. So we kind of play catch up in April, and then we play catch up again in October, so that we can keep our meetings on a try to keep them in the middle of the month as much as possible. But with that one amendment, meeting in January on the 14th and 15th, instead of the 15th and 16th, that would be the only suggestion that I could make that we can act on tomorrow to approve that calendar. If there's no objection to that, I'm gonna recommend that, since at the end of the day, I think this is my call. So to recommend the calendar, but thank all of you for your input. I really, really appreciate it, all you board members. Thank you very much.
Any other comments about the calendar? All right. Item number 3.
So look, actually, so you're gonna, the calendar's gonna change, are you building the agenda, so is that gonna have to be a separate vote since we're making a change?
I think we should, either way, I think we should have, had a separate vote on that and not put it in as part of the agenda, but in light of the change, I think probably a separate vote involved is warranted.
Ms. Taylor?
All right, item number 2. The State Board of Education will consider universal reading screeners to be approved for use by Georgia Systems and Schools as part of their comprehensive early literacy programs in accordance with the Georgia Early Literacy Act and state dyslexia requirements.
All right. Comments from the board?
If I may, as all of you can see on the agenda, we have 2 recommendations. And I want to give you a little background, and then I have Dr. Lindy Morgan from the Deal Center who's here to kind of walk us through how they came to their recommendations. And then we'll give the superintendent an opportunity to kind of walk us through how they came to their recommendation, because they're not identical, as you can see. But I want to remind the board right now that at the last legislative session, Senate Bill 464 required that the state board, by May of 2025, reduce the number of screeners. These are universal reading screeners for diagnosing reading difficulties or challenges with kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. That the number of eligible screeners, and the current list, I believe, has 14 lists on it. That Senate Bill 464 requires that by May of next year, we reduce that number to up to 5. All right? Up to 5. Now, the Literacy Council asked the Sandra Dunnigan Deal Center at Georgia College and State University to do a review of any screener that a vendor wanted to submit through a standard protocol, and have that vendor screener reviewed and rated. And Dr. Morgan's going to take us through that whole process. But I just want to remind you that Senate Bill 464 mandates this, that we go to up to 5. It also, even though they gave us till May of 25, I think all of us are, there's a consensus among all of our board that it's in the best interest of school districts that they have this information as soon as possible, because there are a variety of screeners in use right now. Some have been in use for some time, some maybe only for a year or 2. But we're getting into the budget development season for local districts, and also the longer we wait to do this, the less time districts have to get their staff up to speed if a new screener is required. The selection of a new screener is required. So, so that we can hear from the people who are making both recommendations, I'd now like to call on Dr. Lindy Morgan to come to the podium. And if you can briefly kind of walk us through the process and the charge that you were given by the Literacy Council to keep us in compliance with Senate Bill 40.
Most definitely. I have slides. Are they going to come up on the screen? There we go. Thank you. And thank you to this group for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to share with you our process and recommendations for universal reading screeners for the state of Georgia. And within my report today, I would like to acknowledge the alternate recommendations that Superintendent Woods has put forth and to provide some context as to why I stand firm on the recommendations that we have submitted. Before I start, I want to express my gratitude to Amy Denty and Jennifer Lindstrom from the Georgia Department of Education, who have partnered with me in chairing this committee. Decisions all along the way were supported by the two of them. Also Sarah Richards and Andrew Pilgrim of the Literacy Council, who served in an advisory capacity for the group. As Chairman DeJarnett said, this past session, Senate Bill 464 was passed. And the purpose of the bill was to initiate a process where the best screeners, up to 5, would be identified and recommended for use by the state. Here you can see the proposed timeline for the bill. And in response to the language of the bill, I submitted a proposal to the Executive Committee of the Georgia Council on Literacy outlining the approach that we would take in reviewing and selecting screeners for recommendation. That was approved on June 7th, and in consideration of our charge and the time-sensitive nature, we moved quickly. The first thing we did was to try to identify a committee to lead the work. We created an application process, and to ensure adequate geographic representation, each member of the state board was encouraged to recommend an individual from their region with relevant expertise to apply. In addition, individuals in the state with experience and expertise in literacy screening were also invited to apply. This is our advisory group members. We refer to them as the LSAG, the Literacy Screener Advisory Group, and we have a few members here with us today and some online. This was an incredible group to work with who took this task very seriously and put in many, many hours of work on the project. Our responsibilities were as follows. Prepare screener review criteria, establish timelines and procedures for screener submission, the RFI process, conduct that process, review those screeners that were submitted, and then to select the highest quality screeners that meet criteria both for House Bill 538 and Senate Bill 48, and then provide recommendations and a report to the State Board to be considered at this very meeting we find ourselves. A few other considerations. I think it's important to mention the rigor and integrity with which our work was conducted. We aimed for transparency in our process by meticulously documenting our work, maintaining records of communication and activity associated with the process. In tandem to that, we went to great lengths to conduct a process that was both confidential and free of bias. Any and all communication with screener vendors was done within a standardized protocol and was systematically applied. Committee members were also guided to refrain from engagement with any vendors or their lobbyists during this period. Confidentiality in the review process itself was protected in 2 ways. Members did not share information with those outside of the committee, and while they were conducting their independent reviews, members did so without communicating to one another about the screeners that they were reviewing and the scores that they were applying. This slide shows our timeline, which goes through the application process, our first meeting to establish review criteria, announcement of the RFI on August 28th. which included a 41-day submission period with an embedded inquiry period so that screener vendors could submit questions and receive a response to those. This table shows the breakdown. Oh, I skipped a page. This table shows the evaluation tool that was posted along with the RFI. So we developed this tool. It included two parts. The first part included a series of yes/no questions aimed to ensure that screeners met legislative requirements. Screeners not meeting those requirements were dropped and were not considered for full review. The second part of the tool allowed for evaluation of the quality of evidence with different items using a 5-point scale with a possible total of 155 points. The items in our screener evaluation document were derived from a review of the literature of key considerations for effective screeners, examination of guidelines set forth by the National Center for Intensive Interventions, and review of evaluation procedures used by other states. So the tool consisted of these 5 sections that you see. The first, constructs measures, tells us whether screeners are indeed measuring the right things. This included 11 constructs that are highly predictive of reading ability. We evaluated technical adequacy. This had to do with the type of scoring that the tool provided, as well as whether screeners' scores were valid, reliable, and how well they classify students at risk, which is entirely critical to make sure that all students receive the interventions that they need. We evaluated administrative quality. This was whether the screener provides user-friendly reports for both families and teachers, and the extent to which the tools are capable of progress monitoring. We also evaluated linguistic diversity and cultural bias in their sampling and items. Usability and support had to do with customer service, the ease of administration, the duration the assessment takes, and the level of support for users, including professional development and technical assistance. I want to point out that our review was about identifying the highest quality screeners for those in the state, those that are best going to identify children at risk. We discussed considering statewide screener usage, but agreed that usage fell out of the scope of the work that we were tasked with, and so we chose to focus exclusively on screener quality. We received 16 total submissions. Upon preliminary review, 4 of those were dropped due to submission instructions not being followed or submissions being incomplete. That left us 12 screeners. Those 12 were sent out for review to our 15 members of the group. They were randomly assigned, each were assigned 4 applications to review, and then when we met in October, the group decided by consensus that an additional 3 screeners did not meet criteria, so therefore those screeners were not scored. Those screeners lacked evidence for being able to accurately identify students at risk for reading failure, or they did not address all of the required measurement constructs, or they had limitations in their progress monitoring capability. And so they were dropped from the full review, leaving us with 9. This table shows the breakdown in scores for the 9 screeners considered rank ordered from highest to lowest. The 4 screeners in our recommendations have an overall score range from 142.6 to 133.2. And as you can see, they're tightly aligned across all areas that we measured. Below the 4, there was a substantial break in scores, as indicated by the orange line. Note that iReady, just under the orange line, scored 13 points below our 4th ranked screener. The screeners below the cutoff had weaker scores on all evaluation categories, and those screeners clustered together in a similar scoring profile. You'll notice that our 2nd ranked screener, EPS Reading Assistant, is not on the superintendent's list. This school's tool scored 19 points higher than iReady and MAP. This is an excellent tool that is new on the market, but is very well validated and has already been adopted for use by a few other states. Just to provide a little more context on the difference between our recommendations and the superintendent's, this table shows the average score of our 4 recommended screeners as compared to iReady and MAP. Those 2 screeners are weaker on constructs measured, having individual scores, often percentile ranks provided for each construct, both user-friendly teacher and family reports, their ability to effectively monitor student progress over time, attention to linguistic diversity and cultural bias, the administration time, and customer support available. I do want to take a moment to remind you that Senate Bill 464 specified that 1 screener will be provided free to LEAs. Cost information has been collected on those 4, and our top-rated screener, Amira, has been designated to be the free screener, and that funding has been included by the Georgia Council for Literacy in its fiscal year budget request. Our committee and myself, we understand the weight and implications of making these recommendations, and we deliberated at great length over our decisions. The group ultimately agreed by consensus that these 4 screeners are the superior choices, and they provide adequate variety to serve all of Georgia's LEAs. Again, our charge was to select the best screeners, and we've completed that task through a rigorous, transparent process that required a tremendous amount of work from a statewide committee of experts. I understand that the requirements of House Bill 538 have put significant stress on our LEAs to make many changes in a short period of time. And I respect the superintendent's efforts to consider what screeners are currently being used across the state. That said, I believe that positive change requires disruption very often. And while it may be a challenge for districts to shift course, we've done this work as quickly as possible to give them as much time as possible. If we go with statewide usage as the deciding factor in this decision-making, we run the risk of compromising quality in favor of convenience. In light of this, I respectfully request that this body consider our screener recommendations. Thank you.
Now, if nobody has any questions, I'm gonna be real disappointed. So, because many of you have asked me those questions, but you've got the expert here. So now's your opportunity to ask Dr. Morgan some of those questions.
Could we hear from superintendent
Yeah.
first and then come back and ask those questions?
I'd like
Absolutely. Can you stay with us, Dr. Morgan?
Most definitely.
We'll just allow you to have a seat, and then we'll ask the superintendent to make his recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I think all you received the information I, added. We looked at a full complementary of 5 screeners, again, adding iReady and also MAP to the list itself. Looking at the screeners themselves, again, what's pointed out, you looked at the overall scores. But if you continue to look at the sub-scores, again, they were fairly close to line. There was not a lot of discrepancy, across the board when you look at that information and across the board. Whether we're looking at disruption or not disruption, with that, there's a lot of things moving within literacy even now. We are looking at new adoption of standards, which I dare say will probably have more to do with disruption and change and improvement within our scores, just as what we saw with math as we continue to move forward. One of the things in looking at the information itself, things look good on paper. You can make recommendations, and again, with that. But I also look at practicality and reality within the state of Georgia. You will look at whether it's iReady or MAP system. I don't think there was any work or anything that was looked at as far as looking at what is actual usage within the state of Georgia. What does it actually say? You'll notice that with their number 2 recommendation, it is not used in Georgia anywhere. And I would remind the board that when we brought Beacon, forward with that,
That was one of the questions that was asked. How much is Beacon being used? What is the level that is being used out there? What is there information that we can get? And I think that what you will find out is that with both these systems, and you look at who is using both iReady and whether it's Amir or, again, not disparaging any of the groups that are up there, but I think what you'll find out is that you have some very accomplished school districts that are succeeding with you know, whether it's iReady or MAP, you know, Fulton County being one of the major leaders in the state. And so my thing is looking at what is actually being done within the state. I think practical application is what we have to, you know, definitely consider. These districts, yes, they have invested a lot in this, but I think that, you know, these are choices that they made. And I think that it is trying to look at, you know, the investment they have made, the training with the teachers. Again, I cannot speak for what will take place in the future, whether it's with this one, you know, recommendation that's out there, or what does that, you know, actually entail as we continue to move forward. But I do think it's very important that we look at the overall method. Again, like I said, I don't think there's much difference when you look at the subcomponents and the capability there, and once you drill down into that. But also, you know, I feel that the process was incomplete. I think you do have to look at what is actually being done and how's it being used in Georgia. You know, it's great that we have, you know, other states that have, you know, using things, but there are other states that are not Georgia. They say we are unique just as any other state in that application, and how our districts and how we choose things and how we choose to use district or at least screeners within the state of Georgia. And again, as you know, that definitely varies from state to state. And so again, we are not looking at anything you know, I don't think is adverse and different as far as being able to elevate. Again, all we did is we looked at the second choice, again, was not being used in the state of Georgia at all. So again, I think allowing these next two screeners to come up, I think there were, you know, 6 and 7 on the list. There was not all 4 slats were or options were used, or all 5. And so, you know, I felt that these 2 were very good. You know, initially when we looked at this, and again with the deal center itself, you know, the M-Class actually was a moderate, you know, score on the first go-around. And what we find is iReady was actually listed strong. So again, my question would be, what has changed since then? You know, if it's the parameters of what is being put in the RFP, then again, you can see that there are slight changes that potentially could take place. So it depends on what questions you are asking, what are the information you were looking at, that all of a sudden you have somebody that's moderate is now listed as strong, and somebody that's strong is listed, you know, below the list. And so I think you have to take in consideration, again, what is being asked, and again, because, you know, once, you know, we have these parameters in there, that's all you have to go by. That's all the committee has to go by. But I think that, you know, looking at some intangibles, it definitely is trying to say, hey, what is going on, you know, throughout the state? What are our districts saying about the product that they are using? And I would, you know, lean on them a little bit, you know, stronger to say, hey, is this doing the job? And I think you look at the results at some of the districts, again, that are using, whether it's both, I mean, any of the screeners. And I would encourage you to look at what is being used. And of course, I think quantitative studies you look at that, of course, with both iReady and with MAP, I mean, they're a larger percentage population of student population, not district, or even with districts that again, I think you have more quantitative data that you could use when it's looking at what is being done within the state. And so, you know, this is where I felt that you know, including these 2 options, you know, would be healthy. Again, like I said, ultimately, you know, there will be one that will be chosen. But I think trying to make it fair across the system, and again, something that we know that is actually being used within the state, looking at the information, as I said, you know, all of a sudden we have strong to weak, weak to strong, or moderate, you know, and again, what is changing within the system itself, and why there are certain changes there. I don't know, Dr. Aldridge, I don't know if you have anything you wish to add, or Matt at this time?
I just, I think you covered all the points. I think the main thing to think about is just the, looking at the work that the committee did and valuing, the hard work there, but also valuing the integrity and the hard work that's happening in our, LEAs. And, disruption it can be powerful, but too much disruption at one time can also hinder the goal that we're all working for. And we know what that is. We know it's to ensure that every boy and girl in our school system in the state of Georgia is taught to read and then has the opportunity to achieve maximum success. And I would just point out too that, not to be singular focused on the lens of the screener itself, but the bigger context and how the screener impacts the infrastructure and what I would call the literacy ecosystem of the school district. And that is the fact that screener, it is about giving the screener to the individual student. But then the power comes in, how do we take the data that the screener generates? How do we have the appropriate training so that teachers have the skill and the knowledge about that particular screener to make the instructional decisions for maximum impact? And intentionally, these screeners are used for interventions, for your school-wide MTSS process. They're used to make decisions about acceleration, to make decisions about remediation, to make decisions about all components of instructional, decisions. And I think that's important to understand from the LEA lens. And that piece is bigger than changing a screener. That piece is a big part of their entire instructional ecosystem. So, and of course, as always, when we get to the point of questions, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to entertain those. But, I think you can look at the data that was put out at the board item, and there's some percentages about, how many folks in our entire state, what that usage looks like. Matt, I'll turn it over to you in case you want to add something else.
Yeah, I would just add two things. As one, just reiterate the point of the superintendent's recommendation that I-RADIA and MAP were the next two rated screeners by the Dill Center's report. So these weren't just plucked out of the full list. These were the next two rated, highest rated screeners. And even though this is a comprehensive report and the group looked at a lot of different things, one factor that was missing is actual performance of these screeners. These screeners are happening in the state, as you can see from those numbers. We have some screeners being used together 40% of the districts in the state, over half our students, but we didn't really look at the performance of the screeners. So what do we see from literacy rates within those districts as part of this evaluation?
So again, to you, I submit, the recommendation I brought before you. I think it is a fair, approach. Again, looking at it's something a little bit more comprehensive that was done, performed. And so if there's any questions from myself or the staff, we're glad to entertain. But of course, at the end of the day, we'll accept, whatever this body determines, and we'll move forward as a state. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Woods. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, our Teacher of the Year would like to make a few comments at this point.
Absolutely. So this is what I'm here for, right? I am
That's
the
right.
legs on the ground. And I looked over a lot of this data significantly and broke it down by the different components that were there as well, and also saw that, you're looking at a few points difference between the individual components. So it makes that 13-point difference that's there. But when you divide that up over the 6 different areas, it's not as significant as it seems. And I was concerned because I have been traveling around the state and speaking to teachers, and there's something to be said about disruption. I spoke to some teachers recently, and they were talking about every single year when you have a new curriculum, the amount of training and support that it takes to change a curriculum, to change an assessment. It's significant and it's draining and it's frustrating to teachers, quite honestly, when it's constant. I spoke to a teacher the other day, and she said for the last 5 years, I spent my planning periods, learning this new assessment. And then the next year it was learning a new curriculum. And then, it just goes on and on and on. And so to say that almost 100 different systems are using I-RADIA and MAP, and for us to take that away as an option, that's a lot of systems and a lot of teachers that are going to have to be trained on something new. And I know with my system specifically, when the Dill Center made the recommendations in 2023, they looked at what was considered to be strong. And I-RADIA was one of those things that looked to be strong. And so I'm sure a lot of other systems chose based on that information. And then for us to come back and say, well, we're not going to do that anymore, that's frustrating. So, my system ended up using something different. So these two won't affect me individually, but I just think about the weight that it carries. when we are looking to change something for the teachers, because it's not just a switch that you flip. The amount of training, and for parents as well. Learning to read, when I was looking at the one under administration that has 25 points, a lot of that is ease of being able to use and understand the reports that are there. Well, if they've been utilizing the iReady reports for years, the teachers and parents know how to utilize those. And so even if the report that they're switching to is better, it's different, and it's something that's going to take 1 or 2 years for them to adjust to. So consider that as well. But I mean, these are all great screeners. I've used many of them. I've taught with many of them. But just remember, they're a screener. It's not the instruction. It's what happens after the screener that is so critical. So we're looking at just taking that data, and I think that these have it here because they were all recommended. If they had not had the components needed, they would have been, shoved off at the beginning, as 4 different screeners were. So just take that into consideration because teachers are tired, and it's hard anytime that we implement something new like that. So I'll be, glad if you have other questions or concerns. I could just kind of tell you what it looks like. Boots on the ground that's a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions or concern from the board members? Yes, Mr. Dawson.
I have a question for Dr. Morgan and for Richard Woods. We'll let Dr. Morgan go first. Okay. Dr. Morgan, thank you for the report. It's great. I've read it, and I appreciate you being here today. I'm curious, the group that decided, was there a vote of the group to choose up to 4, and how did that vote go?
The group deliberated for a very long time about the decision. At one point, the group even floated the idea of submitting only 1. It was a matter of consensus. The discussion lasted several hours, and we decided to honor that break, particularly in consideration of the fact that iReady and MAP scored almost identically. We felt like it wouldn't be appropriate to select one and not the other. So we went with the 4. I will say that every member of the committee signed off that they agreed with the contents of the report. And so there was full agreement. May I make one comment as with regard to how screeners were ranked last year versus this year? I think it's important to note that last year that was very specifically a psychometric review, meaning that on technical adequacy was the only piece that was evaluated last year. We were looking at screener validity, reliability, and sensitivity and specificity. So that was a very fine-grained analysis. So you can't compare apples to oranges. This was a much broader and comprehensive examination of the submitted screeners.
Thank you. My second question is for Superintendent. Sure. I want to make sure I understand the math on your recommendations. Let me get to that. Just a second. All right, so if I'm doing my math correctly, 68% of the districts are using the 5 that you're recommending. If the districts in Georgia.
The district, yes.
Right, and that accounts for 85% of the students in K through 3.
That would be, yeah.
Okay. So the 5 here account for 85% of students in Georgia.
Yes.
In K through 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I just have a comment. I'm having a lot of trouble with this because the beginning of every one of my decisions is supporting local control. I think the government closest to the people or the student is the most effective. They're run by local people that are locally elected, and they make local decisions that are best for their districts. And I have gotten 6 calls from superintendents who wish to continue using their platforms that they're happy with. And those 2 platforms are not on the Deal Center recommendation list. I also believe in the free market and letting the free market work. And the cream always rises to the top. So I have a lot of issue with this, and I'm not sure how my decision is going to be made. But I can tell you that we work for the people and the constituents. What they say matters, and I think we should listen to what people who boots on the ground are saying as well. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson.
And I could just add in response to this, again, the point making that I tried to make is that, yes, maybe you didn't look at all the components last year when we looked at the components. Again, I go back, what questions or what technical things are being looked at will determine what this process looked at. But again, I could also look at that technically, we did not look at how's it being used in Georgia. I don't think we did a good analysis, or there was no analysis done on the actions that, again, how's this being used, throughout the state. Again, I go back to say that there are some strong districts that are doing some really strong things when it comes to literacy that are not using any one of these, or not using any of the four that are being presented today. But again, and my question is, and I'm looking at it from a practitioner, again, I look at results, not something that is necessarily on a paper, but I've got to see something that's hard. And I think that, again, looking at how you perhaps put questions out there, how is it addressed, I think to the committee, and again, no disparaging, because you were given charge within a certain parameter to look at this. And I think that, and again, looking at the components there, again, they were not necessarily significant, as Witcher said, but, I think trying to thoroughly look at who is on the list of, like, again, for Amira, again, looking at those school systems, looking at the results. And I think you have to look at results across the board about what is being done within the state of Georgia.
Any other comment? Yes, Ms. Kenmore.
Full disclosure, I am a board member of the Deal Center, and I just want to make sure you know that I was not involved in the review of the screeners, nor did I provide any input in the 4 screeners that were recommended by LSAG. So I wanted to put that out there. Disclosure. Okay. With that said, we have many rights and privileges as individuals and as a board, but the right to read is a right I will always support for the children in this state. And the current usage of screeners, in my opinion, does not automatically elevate the score or the rank of a screener. Nor does it override the recommendation that LSAG has put a lot of time, energy, information, and everything into. And just because a screener is not being used different places across the state does not mean that that is not a screener that our kids need. There are a lot of things that we have done in education for our children where we needed to do something, make a change, to make improvements. And the screeners that we have to satisfy SB 464, I think we really need to take this into deep consideration. A lot of time, energy, and everything was spent, and a lot of people used a lot of information gathered together that Dr. Lindy Morgan has presented here today. I look at quality over convenience any day, even in my own household with my own children and grandchildren. Quality over convenience. It's convenient for them to go to the store and get candy to eat because it will satisfy something that they want. But I know the quality of their health depends on a balanced diet, and I make sure they get what they need, even though they may think they want something else. And I want to make sure that every child in this state gets the quality opportunity to learn to read and gets a quality screener that will help elevate them to be able to get that skill set that they need. So with that said, I just would like to stand in support of the recommendation of the screeners that have been put forth by LSAG.
Thank you, Ms.
Can I follow up on that too? It's been a long journey for a few of us on this board that have been side by side with our parents and all that, children, their play is not good enough. And what we experienced on this journey was hearing from parents. I see some teachers out here, I see parents out there that have been in schools and have begged for a quality screener. And that doesn't mean that math or already isn't good, but we have an opportunity at this point to have 4 elite screeners that check every button. You know, you start looking and some of them might do phonemic awareness up to 2nd grade, but it misses 3rd grader. But right now, we have 4 elite screeners that have met the test, have been vetted properly, have gone through the course of what is needed to have a true quality screener. And that was the spirit of this whole thing with 464. And Richard, I can tell you, when I saw this on Friday afternoon that you put this out, it took my breath away because I thought, we have been working. Actually, Jason and I asked you 2 years ago almost, maybe a year and a half, to vet those screeners. And all we got was that RFI. And we've been talking about this. And when I saw this, I thought, where is the spirit of what this 464 meant? And we had House Bill 538 that came to us. And you know, there were a lot of districts that were doing balanced literacy. We were hiccuping on things. And finally, and I see some of the committee out there that were on that committee with the dyslexia group. We peeled back that onion and we saw that these kids needed a systematic teaching of phonics. I've said these words, 7 of them completely, every time. And you know what? The governor signed that into law. And there were districts that had to pivot. And it was hard. And we talked to teachers. I know I've been there. And those that were taught balance, didn't know anything about structured, they were struggling some. You know what? When they got that quality tool of letters, they realized they were sold a story on some of the other things, talking and some of that other. But when they got letters and some things with Orton Gillingham, they began to say to us, hey, we have some tools in our toolbox that we didn't know we had. So now they made a pivot. Every system, look at Marietta, look at those systems that were our pilot systems. Every one of them that made that pivot, and I'm sure they felt like some of the we're already into doing this. But it's okay to make a turn if you're making the turn for the kids and it's giving the quality of what we need. I'm sure it is good because it does, it's an instructional tool in a way too. But we're talking about 4 screeners that were superior in rating, and every box in that was checked off. So what's wrong with taking a look and saying, we can do better? We can help our systems that are doing this. Marietta still used some of those same screeners and used them in tandem with other things and came out with great results. But right now, we have had a committee that has worked, and the spirit of this whole thing said, you know what, we're about quality. We're about quality screeners, quality instruction, our quality teachers that we have there. And this group, they didn't look at what systems were using what. They looked at what tool they thought that we at the state of Georgia could put up there on equal ground and give our teachers a great tool that when, you know what, we're looking at characteristics of dyslexia and we're looking at those things in that screener that might target a kid with reading insufficiencies, that it would hit that target and then we could hit that resource and we could move on. And I think we'll find it more time effective. I know already it does take a lot of time, but these universal screeners are gonna do both things. And for the schools, I think we do have to work together with those that are doing other things. But we knew a year ago almost that we were looking at other screeners. And so if we encourage someone to do a screener, shame on us. We should have said, time out, guys. We need to hold on and let's look. So I'm not saying that the 2 that you submitted weren't good. I'm just saying that what I hear is that we have a chance to really go beyond and elevate and give to those students and our teachers. And I think we can put all those frameworks in there that we need to help train our teachers on these screeners. A lot of them they've used, and you know what? Beacon is new, but EPS reading assistance is not new. We just don't have it in our state, but it's been out there. That's why the vetting process came up and it checked every box. Some of these have been out there for 30 years, and we've got 3 years that we're gonna come back and look, and that doesn't mean we're just throwing out anything. We're just saying, why don't we give it a chance on something new? If we always do what we've always done, we're gonna get what we've always got. And why don't we give this a chance? Because that was the spirit of it. That was the movement of what it meant. I'm willing to give it a chance for our kids because I think our kids deserve the best. And I'm willing to work with every one of our districts to say, you're doing this, we'll find a way. Because if you get a free screener, that money can be used, if you owe something on this screener, it can be used there to bridge the gap in the funding. And I'm really ready to think, I know we can pivot. We've done it before. So I have to say that, and I respect you too, Richard. You know that. I've traveled with you. We had a great time on the literacy things. I made excellent comments about lots of things. But I have to say, right now, I think we should stand firm with what we ask in the spirit of that law and what we've worked together with.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Ms. Eller?
Yeah, mine's more of an administrative question. So we've got this rule here. So is it that we're gonna put forward for tomorrow both of these choices? Or do we need to decide here which list we're gonna put forward?
Given that we can't take a vote in these committee meetings
Right.
that applies, I would assume it's gonna take somebody making a recommendation tomorrow. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I'm just curious
Well,
about
we-
the admin.
The way this stands right now, we have 2 recommendations, so we will take them up one at a time.
Okay.
I'm assuming that nobody changes their mind between the first vote and the second vote on the first recommendation and the second recommendation. I would imagine that they would mirror each other. If we have 8 members in favor of the Deal Center recommendation, I'd have to assume that those same 8 members would vote against the department's recommendation, and so the
But that would have
results
to all
would
be
be.
done tomorrow.
Pardon?
That would have to all be done tomorrow, correct?
That'll have to all be done tomorrow.
Got it.
Now, if either one of these presenters wants to modify a recommendation between now and tomorrow, I suppose that is possible. But I can tell you this, we're gonna vote tomorrow. We're not kicking this can down the road.
Let's vote.
Will you make a motion today?
No, we can't do
but-
it today. It's whether it's gonna be
No,
brought
we're not
forward.
voting today. This is
Yeah.
committee meeting day. We're having a discussion. We'll vote tomorrow.
that.
And obviously, it's going to be pulled for a separate vote. It will not be on the consent agenda. Now, so procedurally, to in my experience, that's how we'll proceed.
Okay, great.
Okay? So, all of you are gonna have to make up your mind before we get to that vote. Or you can abstain and not vote for one and not vote for the other, or whatever you wanna do. But, we are gonna vote tomorrow, when it comes up on the agenda.
And I'm not trying to take your work as chairman away, but for the 2 rules, the 1 and 3 will be on the consent agenda, and this will be pulled for a separate vote. Got it.
Calendar
Okay,
will
got
be
it.
pulled
So
for
all
separate
3 are
vote.
separate
Well,
votes.
number one.
One consent, one
Number
consent.
1 is an initiation, so actually, all 3 of these are gonna be voted on separately.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, I've got, I guess while my mic is on, I have a question for Dr. Morgan. One of the administrative format for your recommended 4 screeners. I see here that 2 are computer-based, 1 is a hybrid administration and 1 is staff administered. Could you explain a little bit more about what those terms mean?
Right, so computer-based means that it's entirely child in front of a screen completing the screener, so that it requires minimal to no personnel effort to administer. staff administered is simply that. It requires one-on-one adult with child to administer. And the hybrid, I might lean on my expert here, specifically with regard to it was STAR, correct? It requires a combination of computer-based and staff administered. Does that clarify?
All right. So, Mr. Jones, you mentioned that you looked at, I think I heard you correctly, and you can correct me if I didn't. You looked at district performance of the districts that are using, and I'm assuming that means reading proficiency on the districts and the various screeners. Is there some common thread here that you could point to with the two that are on your list, on the department's list that are not on the deal center's list in terms of district performance in reading proficiency?
What I was saying was, my understanding is the deal center's evaluation did not include that type of evaluation.
Did yours?
We didn't do we weren't charged to do an evaluation.
So we don't know. All of us have, I'm sure, looked at the list of who's using what. And if you haven't, you really should. Okay? Because everybody that's sitting at this table has districts that are, you have 3 or 4, maybe 5 screeners that are in use in your congressional district. And some of those districts, and I know them well and you do too, do very well with their reading performance. But I want to be mindful of the fact that this is a screener. It is not an instructional tool. It is a diagnostic tool. And we can roll out all the analogies, and I've thought of all of them. Folks, this has been on my mind, and ask anybody since the report came to the department. What happens after the screener is done is what matters. And I know that everybody is working their rear ends off to boost reading proficiency. I know everybody is. And Holly is 100% correct. There's a lot of pressure on teachers right now. And administrators. Now, I will say this. If we have to look beyond next August when we're making a decision, correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever we approve will be in effect for 3 years. Is that correct?
That was not specified in the statute, but however, given that the science of reading difficulties is going to continue to change, new products are going to come on the market, some are going to come off. We should not consider these recommendations appropriate in perpetuity. So the committee recommended having a review every 3 years.
Okay, the committee, let me make sure I hear. The committee recommended revisiting this every 3 years.
Correct.
Okay, and you're right, the law is silent on that, thank goodness. But we could do it sooner, or we could wait longer, depending on how the metric that really matters, which is reading proficiency in this state, is going. But again, and yes, I've heard from superintendents too. I've heard from a couple of RESA director. I've heard from some other association execs. And they're on both sides of this issue. Okay? And look, my experience is all the experience I've got, so I can't comment on anybody else's. But I do know that over time, regardless of how this ends up, the highest rated screener is going to be the free screener. All right? So districts that don't make the final cut, and there are districts there that are using screeners that didn't even make it into this discussion.
That's right.
All right? They're going to have to make a change. All right? So, yes, look, it is a local control issue, and I'm gonna invoke my good friend Dr. Barrow on the back row back there. Sometimes where you stand on this issue depends on where you're sitting. And right now, I'm sitting in the chair's position, and I'm not real comfortable about it. But one of the other chairs I also sit in is on the Literacy Council Executive Committee. In 3 years, a lot of districts are gonna be using this #1 screener for 2 reasons. It's free, and it's the top-rated screener. Now, either they're gonna change sooner, or they're gonna change later when their next contract comes up, or when budgets get really tight, or when they feel like their teachers can handle the change. But I can tell you this as a former superintendent, that change will occur over time. Now, I don't know if that tips the scales in one direction or the other for you as a board member, but the change will come. The question is, in your mind, how soon is that change going to come and who's going to be affected? Okay? Is it going to be the districts that are using the, 6 screeners that are currently under discussion, or the 3 that didn't make it to the finals? All right? The other question is, it's the highest rated screener. And I think how we message this after the decision is made is going to be important. If we were just doing the cheapest screener, I'd have a whole different perspective on this. But both recommendations involve the best screener, and because it is going to be the free screener. My last comment on this is this. I want to commend Dr. Morgan and her team for the work that they did, because they were under a lot of pressure. And as you can see, I'm sure they could have gotten a lot of phone calls from vendors. They could have gotten a lot of phone calls from districts. No one I have talked to who was either on the Literacy Screener Advisory Group or observed this process, no one has questioned this process. So, thank you for the work. Look, folks, at the end of the day, we're all supposed to be on the same team. And at the end of the day, we will be on the same team. And when we vote on this tomorrow, yes, somebody's gonna complain their screener didn't make the cut. And then they'll get back to work and figure out what the next step is. And for some districts, that's gonna come Friday. And for some districts, that's gonna come in June when they approve their next budget. And for some districts, it may not come until next year. But I'm telling you, from the outside of our ecosystem, here's the optic that concerns me the most. And I usually don't get too opinionated about this, but this is the optic that concerns me the most. We're going to do better in Georgia in literacy. I know we are, because our teachers are working hard. But right now, the numbers are not on our side. We have too many students that are not on grade level at the end of 3rd grade. And if we sit here and say that because half the kids in this state are being screened on a couple of instruments, that staying with what they've always been doing and keep on doing what we've always been doing and expecting a better result, the optics on that are not in our favor. And it only gives voice to our critics in public schools, which I am categorically against, that say that public schools can't cut it anymore. Because we can. Now, do we need to nudge them on some occasions? And again, right now I'm sitting where I'm sitting, so I'm saying what I'm saying, and I might not have said this 10 years ago when I was a superintendent. But I'm telling you, I have always been about performance. Always. And we have the right people in the right places, and now we have access to better tools. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have little comments about it. Like Mr. Donaldson, I was reached out to by 5 of the superintendents in my district that encompass the vast majority of the students in my district. The 3 largest school districts don't use iReady or MAPS. But all of those school superintendents have concern about the disruption. Of course, not for their districts because they're using, others that are already on the top of the list. But I keep hearing about disruption. I agree with your comments that in 3 years, I don't know that I agree that there's 2 reasons. I think number 1, it's free, and number 2, it's free is probably why it's gonna change. But I agree that's gonna change. But in your discussion, what an action for us just to take the recommendation from the Deal Center completely takes away from the local districts is when they get to determine how much they want to put on those teachers within that, let's say, 3-year period.
I hear you.
So based on what I'm hearing from my district, I agree, everybody's focused on literacy and increasing our ability to read in the state of Georgia. But with the training for the high quality instructional materials, the other changes that we've put down for them, if there was a way to move that timeline just a little further out and give them time to spread the load with their staff, and then oftentimes a lot of these rural districts, they're exceptionally limited staff. It might behoove us to take a little different approach. Now, I too applaud the work of the committee, and I'm not taking away anything for it, and you have far more knowledge than, quite frankly, I will ever have, nor do I care to have, quite frankly. But we have to look at it from the holistic approach. To me, the superintendent's recommendation gives deference to 75% of what they've recommended. And puts an option out there to say the screeners that have been designated as strong by this board's information within the last 12 months that have produced good results in many school systems in this state can continue pushing us down that road to increasing literacy levels, especially for that 3-year period. And it's not a matter of saying good is okay. It's a matter of making a recognition of the work that's being done, that will be done to get us to the end goal. Now, I heard at the beginning of this process with the work of the Literacy Council that Mississippi was the standard. It took them 10 years, and we're gonna beat the 10 years. It may be decisions just like this and concern for workload on teachers that caused Mississippi to take a little longer than we think it will take us, but I don't necessarily think that's bad. So for me, I think the superintendent's recommendation gives deference to the work that has been done and doesn't take anything away from it, but gives consideration to what the specific needs are within many of our local school districts that we can support with a decision to potentially add those other 2 and remove one that, quite frankly, isn't gonna be used in the state of Georgia in the next 12 months anyway. So to me, I am leaning more toward, honestly, the recommendation of the superintendent for those reasons. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Lindsay, thank you again for your recommendation. And I am grateful that LSAC did not put forth a recommendation for just 1 screener. They put a choice out there. They gave us 4 screeners, and these are the 4 top screeners, and there is difference in all of them. Whether, just like she was describing about how the screening process is carried out, whether it's in person, hybrid, on screen. And that is a choice that any of the districts can make. As our former board member Mike Roy used to say, children deserve better than okay. And there are screeners out there that are okay, they're okay. But we want to make sure that our children have an opportunity, and our school districts have an opportunity to choose from the best screening tools that are available so that they can use that to elevate the literacy within their different districts. And as Chairman DeJarnette said, you know, eventually everybody's going to have to make a choice, you know, and like you said, free and free. And it may come down to that, but then there are other districts that have money that are willing to make a different choice. But I just want to make sure that we are able to have screeners that are comparable, that have comparability within all of the different districts. Because, you know, if my child moves from your district to another district, I want to make sure that that opportunity is there for the districts to be able to have that comparability.
Anywhere in the state.
Exactly. And our kids in this state, you know, our literacy rates, they have no choice. They've got to go up. And the way that they're going to go up is that we make sure that we support what is out there to help our children get to the levels that we know they can do. Every child can learn, and every child has a right to read.
I personally think that it's about the timeline.
Yeah,
The
I
timeline.
understand. Mhm.
What flexibility do we have with it?
Oh, the law is pretty specific about what we gotta do.
There's no waiver.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Valdez.
I hate that we're being forced to make this vote where there's non-alignment. Definitely trust what the superintendent's saying, and I think everybody has to recognize disruption with that amount of students that are currently using systems. I also like the opportunity for the districts when we talk about giving local districts the opportunity for a disruptor. There are principals who want the disruptor, there are superintendents who want the disruptor. And speaking from a lawyer perspective only, if I were given these two lists, I like the chairman's third option. I think there's a resolution where we wouldn't have to choose between, but have both disruption and having the ability to not disrupt those local districts. I think there is a common ground from these two lists that if y'all hired me as a lawyer, we can get into a room, kind of hash it out. But you can't. So I'm just saying, I will vote one way or the other. I just wish we could take these two lists, and if you look at what's different between them, with 5 choices, I think it's resolvable without an either or.
Agreed.
And I wish that was brought to the table tomorrow as opposed to the either or. So when you look at computer-based, hybrid, and staff administered, you look at EPS as the disruptor, but you also look at the 2 you want to bring in so that people aren't disrupted if they don't. I think there's a 5-choice list you can arrive at, which wouldn't allow the board to have to fight over which one is right and choose between sides. But I'm just gonna throw that out there. I like the chairman's third option, and I would like to see that tomorrow as opposed to these 2 options.
Yes.
Just a couple observations, and I definitely listening to the disruption on things and as well as the local control. Always been a big fan of local control. I think all of us recognize that screeners are there to, it's not to diagnose dyslexia, it's there to identify those students who may need support. Okay, so the question becomes, for me, is when I'm looking at these scores, and in just layman's terms, does a lower score reduce the likelihood that a student will be identified for requiring support?
I don't think we can globally say yes or no to that. However, those in that bottom segment did not score as well, did not score as favorably with regard to that.
The question for me is, you know, we don't want any students to be missed that are going to need this support. And we have the opportunity to include up to 5. Is that correct? So, to your point, there's room. Okay? What that's going to look like, I don't know, and we're going to have an opportunity to discuss this further, because when it comes to a vote, I mean, think you've got some work to do to figure out how this is gonna be put together. But, we have one agenda item. We don't have multiple agenda items. We have one agenda item with two recommendations. And there might be some modifications that need to be taken into consideration. What those are, I'm uncertain right now. But at the end of the day, through a series of motions and so forth, we're gonna end up with a final list that we'll be voting on tomorrow. All right, and, you know, as far as numbers are concerned, Matt went over it already a bit, but, you know, it's like 250, roughly 255,000 students are being served by iReady and MAP today. And I hear what Holly is saying, and I hear that frequently with regard to the disruption, and particularly with the standards adoptions and the other training that we're going through as well. So I want to do what's best for Georgia students. I love the recommendations that you all come up with, but my sense is we're going to come up with some kind of a hybrid solution.
Consensus. That's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. Consensus.
Any other comments?
I do want to say I really appreciate the conversation that we've had around this issue. And I appreciate the Deal Center for the work that you're doing, Superintendent. But I will tell you, from being a local board member, there's a lot of work that goes into leading a school district through this type of change. And I did hear a lot from teachers, and I still hear a lot from teachers because I do have 3 children. And my 5th grader talks about iReady all the time and her assessments, and we talk about that daily. When I come home from work, now that I don't have to work shift, I'm home at 5 o'clock now. So I will tell you this, there are a lot of superintendents that are losing their jobs because of the disruption that they're causing, because local board members and constituents don't like a lot of disruption. They want what's best for their kids, and they want to be able to have a say-so in some of that. And so while I value the direction of some of our state agencies to provide us with guidance, I also believe in the local control and us being able to take into account the things that our constituents are saying, but also recognizing where we are in our deficiencies and putting in common practices and opportunities for our districts to select and move their districts forward. What's working in some districts may be good. What's not working in some districts may need a change. So this is a tough decision, and I will tell you, it's a tough decision to have to make tomorrow. I would like to see some type of hybrid model, but I also know that there's opportunities for us to get better in the state, but I also have to respect the work that's being done in the classrooms. One of the first things I heard when I got here was we need to learn to respect the work of the practitioner, the people who are in the classrooms doing the work. We are policy, administrative, but we depend on those teachers in those buildings every single day. And I do value the fact that they do have a voice in this decision through the committees that were put together. But I also want to make sure that we as a board understand that there's a lot of work that goes into leading a school district through a critical change as such, and also accepting responsibility for your deficiencies and figuring out how to get better. It's a lot. So.
Let me ask, can I just ask this one thing? If you don't know what, I mean, we're talking about something that a school system has experienced, but they have not seen some of the opportunities that are coming out with the screeners that are in line with each other, that check every box. So how do we know that they won't be more excited because it's easier to give, it's less time, it's more aligned with, some of the screeners aren't even aligned with the standards. They're really more like instructional tools, and that's why our districts need those too. You need those tools so that you can help with literacy in your schools. But that screener, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding if we see something that is really that are really aligned and are strong. And I'm a superintendent, and I haven't had a chance to really experience that and know really what it does. And my teachers, we got teachers out here that we could ask. I mean, how do they know that those aren't gonna be easier because it hits every single element that is needed to be screened. It doesn't miss something. It might hit something in second grade, not do third grade. That's why some of them didn't align at the top. So I'm having trouble, and you know I respect y'all. We've been here a long time. I'm just having trouble understanding we've got an opportunity for something that has truly been vetted as high quality. And I'm not saying the others aren't good, I'm not saying that. But you've got an opportunity to do that. We haven't experienced some of these. I mean, but I wondered if you and I sat down, we'd go, oh gosh, it's pretty good. You know, it's clicking off all these things, and it's not, I didn't get that this score for it missed first grade on some of these. I'm getting something that is systematic across the screen. And so that's what I'm thinking, that, you know, sometimes we pivoted, like I said, with House Bill 538, and look where we're going with our systems. And maybe it might take a pivot for this. And all of those that are doing something different, as Stan said, everybody's wasn't on here in the beginning anyway. They're gonna have to pivot and go, okay. But that's what that's what DOE does, that professional learning does. They're smart. They know how to take these and go in and help our teachers understand how to work with these screeners. That's what they're about. So I don't want us to, I don't know, I'm struggling with knowing that we've got an opportunity to do something. We're 28 in the state and in the country. I meant, yeah.
The country.
And we've got an opportunity to look at 4 screeners that you're gonna get the data that's pretty consistent. And you start mixing it, something in here and something there, you're not gonna get it. And once again, we're gonna be hiccuping. And to get where we want to be might take a little longer. I'm willing to pivot for these kids right now, because in the spirit of what I said, in the spirit of Senate Bill 48, House Bill 538, and 464, that's what it was about. It's time for us to move forward. And
I mean, I think that obviously the law boxes us in as far as we have a time frame that we have to do this in. But I don't think this is an either or, winners or losers, that we pick one or we pick the other. I mean, we may end up having to do just picking one or picking the other. But I don't think that if what we ultimately decide is to take the 4 screeners that the Deal Center recommended, but add on one more, that is not one losing and one winning. I think that's coming up with a compromise that would not only hit the spirit of the law and get us time-wise there, but also in the real world understand when you've got 181 school districts that just because you say something starts on August 1st, 2025, and I'm pulling that date out of the air, I don't know if that's exactly the date, but just because you say something has to be done by this date, in practicality, 181 school districts aren't gonna all get there on the same day. Okay, so I think what I've been encouraged by with what Rich said is that, you know, maybe there is a path that's a compromise path, but I will vote, if it's not a compromise, you know, I will probably vote for the deal list, okay? Because I think that if there's not a compromise, that's the best way to go. But a better way to go, in my view, is to find a compromise. That's my view on that.
will you be here tomorrow with Richard, so that, I mean, will you be here tomorrow? Oh, good. And Richard, will you be here tomorrow?
Of course.
Okay.
I have a school I gotta visit, or district I gotta visit.
But, so April or someone will be here to answer, okay.
Just a quick comment about our board process. Like firmly having our governance hat on and understanding how we use our agenda and not feel pressured to make a decision and pressured to make a decision in a day. this compromise could occur in our committees. That's what the structure's for. Ahead of time, getting the information, having these discussions with experts, with parents, with people that are impacted by it, with superintendents that we hear from. Our committee structure allows for that. So, and several of us, including you, have said we should do some board training on how we use our governance structure to be effective. So that's one comment. 2, disruption. We are here because we're trying to not disrupt schools. We're trying to disrupt poor literacy instruction. Okay, what happens because of that, we can get there, but that is our charge. We have to disrupt poor literacy instruction, and there is a lot that have to be unlearned and learned differently from a classroom perspective, a board perspective, a district perspective, and most importantly, family perspective. How are families going to navigate all this, especially when they have challenges? So when we talk about disruptions, I'm going to protect the school the most. I am the school guy, but the disruption we in this body are looking at is in a way beyond our concern, frustration at the local level. If we can disrupt this trend that we've had for a long time in this country, in the state, that's where we're, so concise, sorry. I went over.
No, it's fine. Anybody? Yes, Ms. Cummings.
Dr. Maureen, thank you so much for the time that you put into this in your committee. I too have heard from lots of different people and had a lot of questions, and you really tried to listen to everybody. And I brought down a couple of little notes that kind of came to mind here. It seems like both recommendations came from 2 very different schools of thought. The weighted averages, the way you gave weight to each one of the different ideas gives a lot of credence to your data, so it's really easy to read, and I understand that. I understand the concepts that you use to weight those. It sounds like, Richard, what your recommendation mostly came from was percentage adoption rate. And that's what's on the information that I'm looking at the moment. I also heard a comment that back in 2023, there was a recommendation that iReady was an excellent program. So what that makes me initially think is, how many school systems adopted iReady after 2023 based on a recommendation that came out, right? And so what's the adoption rate difference between 2022 and now? So was that recommendation, did that really move the needle on that? So did those school systems invest, train, put resources into a program because it was recommended back in the time? So there's a really bit of a difference of that adoption rate. So
The teachers are
that's
shaking their heads.
kind of I'd love to know the difference in that, right? I wanna have the best information to make the best decision here. And if I take all of the data and I make adoption rate part of my analysis, where does that set things, right? Because that's part of the conversation that we have in a compromise. And then Mr. Jones brought up a great idea, part here about literacy rates over time, success rates. Some of the letters and some of the comments that I received did discuss success rates based on different programs. Should that be part of the weighted average when we talk about scoring these different programs? Because we are looking at disrupting so that our kids can read. Are we leaving out parts of the data that become important to make a really good decision? Because if we're gonna disrupt something, I wanna make sure that we looked at every data point that was important. And it sounds like we covered most of them, but we missed out on the literacy rates over time and the success rate of that particular program. That's concerning to me, to leave out success rates. I don't know if that data is available. I don't know who has that. But just in this conversation, we did talk about, right, all of the items that Deal Center looked at, adoption rates, changes in adoption rates, but we have that data. We didn't talk about success. We didn't talk about literacy rates over time with these particular screeners. I'm concerned that we're missing a really important component into the weighted average of how the scores work.
How do we measure success?
I
But
think,
what is our measure? Are we even talking about,
Right.
like, when we talk about success
Right.
and impact, do we even know what we're talking about in terms of what we're looking at? So I think that's more work for us. That's more work for us to really get to an understanding of what is that measure.
I think Dr. Morgan had something
Yes,
to
ma'am.
add. I don't know.
I appreciate your comment, and I think that that's an incredibly important aspect. However, there's so many variables that go into student outcomes. The screener is just one piece. You can have a phenomenal screener, but if further diagnostics are not effective, or instruction isn't effective, or literacy coaching isn't effective, you're going to drop scores. So we have no research design currently to single out the effects of adoption of a screener. So these data, as far as I know, are not available to us.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
No, I was just gonna ask you if you're ready to call this to us.
I'm ready to call it. I don't know exactly where we're gonna be in the morning yet, but we'll
Have we
figure
got
that
a
out.
couple of teachers out there? Could they make a comment?
No.
No?
No disrespect, but here's the thing. We all go to have an annual physical and we all get blood work, okay? And the blood work, if you test for the right things, it tells you what you need to do next. It is not a cure, it is not a treatment, it's a diagnosis. The treatment, the remediation, all of the things that you do after your blood work is what brings your cholesterol down or improves your overall scores. This is what we're talking about now. It's not the instruction. It's the tool that diagnoses. And I think that most practitioners would tell you that accurate diagnosis is really important because you don't want to miss something. In this case, you don't want to miss a kid. Okay? Some of these screeners have an associated instructional remediation tool that goes along with it, and they're still going to be able to have an impact on student growth and all of that. Some of these are standalone screeners. What our charge is, and look, I appreciate all the comments on both sides. This, in my opinion, is good boardmanship because we're having a rich discussion about this. And as I said earlier, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. But diagnosis is important. Parents send us their best children. They don't keep some of them home, okay? They send us all of them. And every time we miss one, we cannot treat it as an acceptable loss, okay? We have to land all the planes. And if we're air traffic controllers, we land them all. That's our job. Our job in the governance world that we sit in right now is to find the best diagnostic tools and give local districts the flexibility to follow up on that diagnosis. Now, you're right. The recommendations don't differ all that much. But and Rich, I really hear you're gonna bring your mediation skills into focus after we get done here. But I want to acknowledge that the Deal Center's work was primarily focused on quality, not frequency. Okay? Now, yes, 3 of the 4 screeners are on the department's list. And yes, there probably is some room for a 5th screener to add to the Deal Center's recommendation. personally, I don't want to discredit the Deal Center's work because I think they followed their task to a T. And they gave us the runaway winners in their rating scale, which I think was comprehensive and of high quality. And yes, I do have some experience in this work. And Jennifer, I really appreciate your question. My response to that would be, screeners have never been more important than they are right now. Because we all have come to the awareness that we were missing kids. We were misdiagnosing. So I think that raises the stakes for us now that we do have more knowledge and more awareness and more understanding, and that the role of the screener has been elevated, frankly, from where it might have been 3 or 4 years ago. I maintain my confidence in the ability of school districts to make adjustments. And I'm not gonna say it's easy, and I'm gonna have to eat some words that I've said on the local control issue, however this goes. But folks, we didn't ask for this. We were handed this mandate. And whether you like the law or not, we are going to follow the law, which means up to 5. So, and I'm not, should a high-performing district that's not using one of the screeners have the opportunity to continue using it? Well, in my opinion, yes, but that's not our charge. That's a legislative question, not a board question. So, and I'm not gonna weigh in on what they ought to do or might do next session with this. What I want them not to do, and I've already told them this, I don't want them to further reduce the number of screeners on a state list. So, I think we need to meet our obligation, and I know we will. I'm not worried about that. And with that, I want to thank Dr. Morgan and Superintendent Woods for the due diligence that they've done in bringing these recommendations. And it's my hope that we can do this tomorrow without a lot of extended discussion. I think all the points have been made. And if there is a compromise out there that we can all agree on, maybe we can decide on that between now and tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm confused on one point of order.
Just
Yes,
one,
you are.
just
The
one.
initiation of the rule can be put on the consent agenda, can it not?
Yes, that is correct.
So that one,
The
item
initiation
one,
can. You're
item
right.
one will be
I
on the
stand
consent
corrected
agenda.
on that.
2 and 3.
Separate vote. All right, so our consent agenda is set. Items 1 through 9 on the budget agenda, items 1 through 3 on the district flexibility agenda, and item 1 on the rules agenda. We will take up items 2 and 3 for a separate vote. Any further questions? We do have some reports tomorrow. We also have some recognition tomorrow. It's not a surprise, but some of our board members have received very nice recognition, and I want to make sure that they get their due recognition for the accolades that they've richly earned. Is there any other business for the Rules Committee, Mr. Griffin?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
All right, any other questions or comments for the good of the order? All right, with that, we stand adjourned.
Awesome.